It's definitely taken a while, but Volkswagen has finally revealed the North American long wheelbase version of the ID. Buzz. It looks basically like a stretched version of the ID. Buzz that we've seen in Europe for a while, but there are a lot of important details that are different. The first one is that obviously we're going to get more room. This is a full 10 inches longer than the ID. Buzz in Europe, but it's not the size of an American minivan, in case you're wondering. The average American minivan like a Sienna or a Pacifica is considerably larger than this. In fact, at just under 192.5 inches long, this is only an inch longer than a Subaru Outback. It's a full foot shorter than something like a Pacifica, a Sienna, etc. So this is probably going to be easier to park, easier to fit in your garage. But Volkswagen points out that it's also about 5 inches taller than a Volkswagen Atlas. So it really does have those classic Volkswagen bus proportions, which is why I'm really interested to see how this sells. A lot of folks have been clamoring for Volkswagen to bring back either the Eurovan or a classic bus, and this is definitely a bus for the 21st century. Now, even though the exterior dimensions are notably shorter than something like a Pacifica or an Odyssey, I suspect the interior is going to be closer than you might think, because when you really look at this, it has a very short hood profile. Now, yes, some of this is occupied by safety systems and other things going on in there. The driver is not actually sitting as close to the very front of the vehicle as it might otherwise appear. There's a decently long dashboard and definitely a raked windshield, but this is nothing like an Oldsmobile Silhouette or something like that from the 1990s. Now, versus the European version of the ID. Buzz, again, we get the extra length. We also get a bigger battery and more power. We'll get a 91 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack instead of the approximately 82 kilowatt-hour pack we find in the shorter ID. Buzz. It's worth noting that the shorter two-row Buzz does not appear to be coming to the United States market at any time soon. Instead of the single-motor rear-wheel drive setup that we find in the ID. Buzz in Europe, we're going to be getting a more powerful single-motor rear-wheel drive unit to start, 282 horsepower, and then basically at the same time, we're also going to be getting an optional all-wheel drive system with 2 motors, but Volkswagen is a little cagey on all the details there. They say it's going to be approximately 330 horsepower, so definitely the fastest bus they've ever made. But even the rear-wheel drive model has a healthy amount of torque. So 282 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque back there in the rear. We don't know what the all-wheel drive model is going to put out as far as torque goes, but this is an all-new electric motor for the rear. So I wouldn't be surprised if the front electric motor was also updated versus what we see in the Volkswagen ID.4. The tall roofline in the ID. Buzz really belies some of the proportions, because this is not only taller than a Volkswagen Atlas, it's about as wide. So in some of the photos you might be seeing out there, it looks like the Buzz is relatively narrow. It's actually not. It's about as wide as the larger 3-row crossovers that are currently available in the United States. So I suspect that interior practicality-wise, it's going to be somewhere between worlds, somewhere between the average minivan and the average 3-row crossover. Now, there is one interesting thing to note, is that if you look into the back of the ID. Buzz, you'll notice 2 things right away. The first one is that it's not going to seat 8. There's going to be a 7-seat version standard, a 6-seat version optional. The next thing you'll notice is that the third row seats don't fold flat into the floor. They do come out, so you can remove them, but as far as functionality goes, it's not going to be quite as practical as some of the North American market minivans that you'll see out there. So even if you remove that third row seat, we don't have a completely flat floor in the vehicle. The second row seats are riding a little bit lower, but if you fold them all down, you will have a flat load floor in the back. It's just that you'll notice the rear portion of the vehicle is actually a little bit higher up as far as floor height than the middle of the vehicle, simply due to the electronics going on back there, the battery pack location, etc. That surprised me a tiny bit, because in the new Kia EV9, which I suppose you could see as a competitor to this, we do find a fairly flat floor in that vehicle all the way around, which really surprised me. But the EV9's third row seats do not come out of the vehicle, so that could make the Buzz a little bit more practical. If you want to fold the third row seats and you don't want to remove them, there is a little shelf that will come out so that way you can store stuff under that extended portion and give you, again, a flatter cargo area in the back. As far as the interior goes, it sticks pretty close to the 2-row Buzz that we've already seen. We get a standard 12.9-inch LCD infotainment system in the middle of the dashboard, running the latest version of Volkswagen's infotainment software. This is also the software package we're going to see in the ID.7, which is Volkswagen's electric sedan, sort of replacing the Volkswagen Arteon and the Passat, kind of, sort of, in the United States. Behind the steering column, attached to the column, which actually moves up and down with the steering wheel, we're going to get a 5.3-inch LCD. This does come across as a little bit small to my eye, especially since the ID. Buzz is really being targeted at a more premium audience than some folks might like. Every version of the ID Buzz, at least to start with, is going to have memory, power, massaging front seats that are also ventilated. I wouldn't be surprised if a lower-end trim came at some point in the future, but this is not the bargain basement Eurovan that you might be thinking of. Also standard is a 2-zone automatic climate control, interior ambient lighting with 30 different design themes, and also some interior color choices that are definitely retro. You can see in these photos that we have sort of a cream on ivory interior color. I think this looks really, really good. I can't wait to see this in person. Also intriguing is what looks like a strip of faux wood running right behind the LCD infotainment system, sort of separating the different levels on the dashboard. I think that's a really attractive look for the ID Buzz. Now, going in closer, you'll notice that we have a ton of USB ports in here, 8 USB ports total, some in the doors. We have USB ports for the third row passengers, and even a USB-C port for a dash camera. So if you're the kind of person that loves to have a dash cam or a GoPro up there, right there mounted at the top of the windshield, there's actually a little port there so that we can plug it in, not have cables dangling around the vehicle. Moving up to the ceiling, we have the largest sunroof that Volkswagen has ever put into a passenger car, and it has electrochromatic capability. So at the touch of a button, it will essentially dim the light coming in. I really like that touch. It's something that I wish, for instance, Tesla would put on their big sunroof vehicles, because otherwise you're left to put an aftermarket shade in there and it just doesn't look quite as nice. This really solves that function, although it's probably not going to get as opaque as some folks might like. Also, it does not open. Now, speaking of glass and opening, you'll notice in some of these photos we have kind of an unusual window on the power sliding doors. The power sliding doors for the second row are going to be standard. We don't have any video of these windows opening, but these are power sliding windows. I'm really going to be intrigued to see how this works in person and whether there's going to be some wind buffeting going on there. They haven't given us too many details about how exactly this is going to function. I am surprised that these aren't slide down side windows like we find in most minivans currently in the United States. I think the main reason for that is that Volkswagen wanted a really low coefficient of drag, and at 0.29, this is very impressive for a vehicle that is this big and this boxy. And part of that has to do with the glass surfacing on the side. When you take a look at the side profile of the ID Buzz, you'll notice that things step in a little bit for the front window because that does slide down in that traditional manner. But then as it moves on to the side, the way the side window looks like it operates, looks like it actually comes out a little bit and then goes in, or sort of goes into the vehicle, I should say, a little bit, and then slides back. That's how it's going to open by all appearances here. And that really gives the side of the ID Buzz a very smooth, very aerodynamic profile. And then right at the back, they have 3 little blips on each side, sort of harkening back to the air intakes for the rear engine Volkswagen bus of yore. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any pricing details just yet for the ID Buzz, but you can expect that it's going to be more expensive than an ID4, probably more expensive than the ID7, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up actually more expensive than the Kia EV9 because of the more premium mission that we find in this. Now, I would expect that the top-end versions of the EV9 with LiDAR and some of those other functions might be more than the ID Buzz, but I suspect it's going to have a fairly narrow pricing window, and it's definitely going to be at the top of Volkswagen's all-electric lineup, at least for the moment in the United States. Now, the other bad part is that it's not going to be on sale until 2024. I don't have exact details just yet, but any way you slice it, the Kia EV9 is actually going to be beating the ID Buzz to market because it will be on sale this calendar year in the United States. In fact, I've been told to expect to drive it on a launch program sometime in early fall of 2023, and by that time it may actually be on sale already with consumer deliveries having actually started. On the other hand, the ID Buzz is likely going to be significantly less expensive than something like a Volvo EX90 or a Rivian R1S or a Tesla Model X, all of which I suppose you could say are competitors to the ID Buzz because they're going to be 3-row, 7-seat vehicles with a reasonable amount of room, although the ID Buzz likely has a much better third row than we find in the EX90. The EX90's third row is very XC90 sized and XC90 shaped. This third row looks big and tall and boxy, and it certainly looks like the third row seats are higher off the ground than average for the average American crossover. Let me know what you think about all that, and then stay tuned because my friend Sofian has actually been at the launch event for the ID Buzz. Unfortunately, Volkswagen did not invite me, so be sure and complain to Volkswagen if you want us to cover more Volkswagen products in the future. Not sure what's going on there with Volkswagen, but at any rate, he will be bringing us some additional content, thankfully from the launch event, so expect that a few hours after you're watching this video. Hopefully he'll be able to hop back there into the third row and give us a few more details. Also on the wait list are charging details. We don't know how fast it will charge. I expect it's going to be faster charging than the ID4, but we don't know any exact details just at this point in time. Be sure and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and of course stay tuned because hopefully I'll be driving the ID Buzz probably sometime later this year. I'll see all of you later.